Baker was in a hole, he grabbed a shovel and just kept digging.
The whole Baker Mayfield experiment with the Carolina Panthers, would you call it a total disaster? Well, today the Panthers cut the quarterback they thought was going to be the guy to turn things around.
They believe that Baker Mayfield cannot get them to their ultimate destination.
Mayfield, this is impossible. 98 yards.
Welcome to LA.
It's been a wild 48 hours.
Don't call it a comeback.
We got Baker Mayfield back today.
Yeah, I heard about that, Shazier. The guy who got dumped by the Cleveland Browns and the Carolina Panthers over just a few months may now be proving his doubters wrong with the defending champion LA Rams.
We also got the Lions on a huge comeback trail with another big win versus the Minnesota Vikings. And, you know, one of the cultural phenomenons of the big blue people, Avatar, is back. Are you pumped about that one, Shek?
I don't know. Get back to me after I watch the first one.
Oh, my gosh. You got to catch up. From Wondery, I'm Ryan Shazier.
And I'm Dave Dameshek.
And this is Don't Call It a Comeback.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.
Hey, Shek, let's get into this Baker comeback.
As you wish, 5-0. Yeah, we all saw Baker Mayfield come back against the Raiders last week, one day after joining the team. He led a comeback from down 13 in the fourth quarter, including an improbable 98-yard game-winning touchdown drive in the final minutes of the game. But of course, this comeback is so much bigger than just that one game. So let's back it up to the beginning of Baker's polarizing NFL career. He already had doubters seconds after being drafted first overall just a few years ago.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield, quarterback, Oklahoma.
I think you got to be careful. He's got to protect that 215-pound frame a little bit better, or he's not going to survive a full season. He certainly is the ultimate competitor. He thinks he's invincible. The NFL will bring you back to earth very quickly.
To his credit, Baker quickly proved some critics wrong when he led the Browns to their best season in a decade and set a record for touchdown passes by a rookie. But even with all the success, his brash attitude stoked the ire of some media members. I personally liked it. I thought it was just the chip on the shoulder the sports town of Cleveland needed. How say you, Shazier?
Hey, you can't have more commercials than touchdowns, bro.
See, I mentioned the cynicism of some media members. But when Baker had a sophomore slump, those takes got even hotter.
I love Baker Mayfield, but he is regressing. He's not seeing open receivers.
What are you seeing that he's not doing right now? What's he doing wrong?
What's he doing right, Grady? Because I'm going to look at this. Here's a guy right now that is a one-read guy, and then he's going to improvise.
Despite the critics, Baker was able to turn it around in the third year and lead the Browns to the playoffs for the first time since '02. But even then, the takes kept coming.
The reality is that he has not been that good. He has to get better. He's gotten entirely too much shine. It has been undeserved.
In 2021, it really did fall apart for Baker. He struggled with injuries nearly the entire season, and everyone, including the fans in Cleveland, turned on him.
When they boo you, they're telling you you stink. You are terrible.
This offseason, the Browns signed Deshaun Watson, a pretty clear signal they were done with Baker. Amid questions about his skill, his maturity, and leadership, the Browns sold the former number 1 overall pick for pennies on the dollar, trading him away to Carolina. Baker lost in week 1 in a chance at revenge against the Browns, and by week 4, national media had given up on him all over again.
Look at the body language of the players. They don't believe in this dude. They're not sold on him.
So Baker lasted 13 whole weeks before the Panthers cut him loose. From last week, looking backwards, then, Baker's career could be summed up with one 4-letter word.
At this point, Baker's career is a bust.
Which gets us to last week. The Rams were the only team to place a claim for Baker on waivers, signing him Tuesday with a game on Thursday night.
He will now potentially be playing for the Rams immediately at the quarterback position. That is what was being said. Who knows how quick he will be to take that LA Ram offense and be able to apply it on the field.
Early in the first quarter, Baker got a shot to take over at QB, and he looked like a guy who had been signed less than 48 hours ago for 3 quarters. But then that final drive.
Mayfield to the end zone to Jefferson. Is that possible? Touchdown.
He still got it. And he still has it. The question is, can he do it for a team at some point over an 18-game regular season? But that's not the conversation to be had today.
Shazier, Baker has always had it in him, but we haven't seen it consistently. Is this the beginning of a real Baker Mayfield comeback?
When you're drafted number 1 overall, it's a lot of potential that people see in you, and it's a lot of hopes that people can see in you. So with him having the pedigree and going that high before, I can definitely see him making some type of comeback, but I don't know. We're going to have to find out.
Well, one thing that has been true in his inconsistent career is he consistently loves trying to prove doubters wrong. So for more on the career revival of Baker Mayfield, how about we talk to Browns legend turned NFL broadcaster and occasional Baker critic, future Hall of Famer, Joe Thomas. All right, there he is. Hey, Joe Thomas. What's happening, Pally?
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, what's up, Joe, man? It's good to see you again on a podcast and not, blocking me on the field. So
it's great to be with you guys today.
Hey, so Joe, I want to talk to you a little bit about Baker. So, everybody's been talking a lot about how it's Baker, learned the Rams playbook in 2 days, and they end up winning in a dramatic fashion in that Thursday night game. So how do you think he ended up doing in the game? And tell us a little bit about your thoughts of the whole situation.
Yeah, I thought he played really well in the game, and that's just not even considering the circumstances of flying across the country and joining a team just a few days before, barely having enough time to figure out what the cadence is going down the field. And I thought the most amazing thing was in that last drive of the game, there was a story that came out that his center was trying to help him with some of the special cadences. Because as you know, Ryan, like when you're in 2-minute offense, like you have a lot of code words for the different cadences, whether it's get up and spike the ball or try to hurry up and get our second play called. And a lot of times those are things that are sort of day one install things, but if you haven't been there for any of the install, you don't know any of that stuff. And so it's pretty amazing that a player that just got there a few days ago, that doesn't even know the cadences to get your team down the field in 2 minutes, leads his team on, I think it was the longest touchdown game-winning drive in under 2 minutes with no timeouts in like 50 some years. Wow. And to think about all the 2-minute drives that the NFL has had in that span of time, and for Baker to be able to do that on just being with the team a couple days is pretty incredible. And it's a testament to not only the hard work and the preparation he's had that week, but the number of things that he was able to learn by going through so many different offenses already in his short NFL career.
Joe, don't you think that, listen, that draft class that he led is always going to be looked back at and what teams should have done in a draft class that included Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. But there's something intrinsic about Bake that he seems to thrive more when he has doubters and a chip on his shoulder and whatever other cliches you want to apply here. Why is that?
I think that's just his personality. That's coming from his background. He was a guy that, had to walk on at Oklahoma and earn a scholarship. He was a lot of times said to be not tall enough to be a quarterback. Then he goes on and wins the Heisman. Then there was a lot of question marks on his ability to use his physical skill set. Not fast enough, not tall enough, not a big enough arm. Would it be able to translate to the NFL game? Then he gets picked number 1 overall. And then the questions are, hey, should he have been the number 1 overall pick? His first year in Cleveland, he sets the rookie touchdown pass record. And then from there, it's been, a little bit up and down. But I think his mindset and his mentality has always been to try to create things in his head, whether they're real or they're not, about, hey, it's me against the world. And that's how he gets the most out of himself. And as competitors, you're always trying to find, what do I need to do in my own brain to bring out the best in me, not only on the field on Sundays, but in my preparation during the week. And Baker's always been that guy that when his back's against the wall and people don't believe in him, that's when he's going to get the most out of himself. And we saw it again last week against the Las Vegas Raiders.
Here, Joe, you should have said there, if we can amend this, we can go back, we can erase those last 90 seconds. What you should say is, how Popeye needed his spinach? We infuse him with some Mission Barbecue at a critical moment during the prep week, and that's when he soars truly, right?
Absolutely. It's that Carolina mustard that he's getting down there at the Mission Barbecue. He's able to use that as fuel, and that's what's leading him down the field in those last 2 minutes in the game. And for sure, when you get Mission Barbecue in you, that's a touchdown winning drive.
I love that. I love me some Mission Barbecue. I'm more of a rib guy, but
Oh,
everybody likes a little bit of brisket and
Carolina mustard. That's where it's at with the barbecue.
Any protein for me, you put that Carolina gold mustard on it, I'm good.
All right, there we go. Hey, so I want to ask you, first of all, I played on the defensive side of the ball, so it's certain positions that it's a lot easier to just plug and play. Even on the offensive line, it's hard to just plug and play. But I would say a receiver is a little bit easier. A cornerback, because you can just tell them 1, 2, 3, which coverage you're in, and some D linemen or running backs. Do you feel like with him just getting plugged in, can you explain how difficult it is just to plug and play as a quarterback?
Well, I've never done it myself, but I can tell you as an offensive lineman, it's hard enough when I have a new guard that's playing that week that hasn't been there very long, because you got to get your footwork right. It's like a puzzle. When you're double team blocking or you're blocking in pass protection, you got to make sure you're not stepping on each other. And everybody's kind of got their own way of using technique with their footwork, where their placement's going to be, where their hand placement's going to be on double teams. And so those are things that need to be learned during weeks and weeks of practice and going out on games. And that's not just something that you can find in a playbook. And the same thing when you're on the line of scrimmage and you're trying to communicate when it's too loud to be able to use your voice. And that's a lot of times even home or on the road, where you have to use hand signals. You have to just look at somebody and you have to look at the player that you're going to be watching with your eyes on a double team or in pass protection. Hey, if he goes over there, you got him. If he comes over here, we'll pass it off. And you got to be able to use those nonverbal communication cues to be able to get that type of stuff done. And at a quarterback level, that's another step beyond that, even, because you're talking about timing, you're talking about rhythm, and you're talking about throwing to a spot a lot of times, especially when you're talking 2-minute drill and you're trying to hit the hole in the zone. And you got to know, hey, this is how he likes the back shoulder throw. This is how he likes those deep dagger routes, like when he's got a safety that's driving on him. He's got to know, hey, what is the receiver like? What can I get the ball there with, the velocity, the height on the ball? And those are all things that it takes a lot of quarterbacks more than just a couple seasons to figure out, to make sure that they're on the same page, to be able to reliably go down the field. Any quarterback can go in and hit a couple passes, but to be able to put together a big drive, that's what it takes experience to be able to go and do those type of things, because it's hard in the NFL to put play after play, to put 10, 12 plays together to get down the field. I mean, just look at Deshaun Watson in his first 2 games in Cleveland. His first game, now he was rusty because he hadn't played, but he also wasn't on the same page with his receivers because he didn't know how they liked things. He didn't know how they were going to see the defense and if it was going to be the same way he was, if they're running an option route. Like, he needs to be able to get on the same page with those guys. And that's something that almost the only way you can do that is with experience. You can't do that on a phone call. You can't do that looking in a playbook.
Wait, so you mentioned the Browns have a new quarterback. I'd not heard.
They do.
Oh, wait, we'll get to him.
It's kind of new, yeah.
We'll get to him in 1 second. I do feel like it's kind of funny. Do you suppose, Joe, as a pro football player, and as a matter of fact, you got some pushback several weeks ago when the Colts hired Jeff Saturday, who was inexperienced. This feels like a little bit like a close cousin to that, which is to say that, does Baker Mayfield expose, like, oh, yeah, you can just walk in the door same week and get it done in the NFL. You don't need to do all these fables about he sleeps on the couch and it's only 90 minutes all week to get the job done. That's how committed he is. Has Baker Mayfield just laid bare that maybe you don't need to do all that?
Mm-hmm. I thought you were going to say that Baker Mayfield was being hired to be the head coach of the Los Angeles Rams, and then that would be the same thing as what we saw in Indianapolis. But no, I think it's a testament, one, to Baker Mayfield's preparation and his ability to absorb information quickly, right? Because each week you're going to have game plan specific things that are new from week to week. And so he wouldn't have been behind the 8 ball on those type of things. But the core and the base of your offense is going to be totally new, where you're going to be totally behind. And that is the hardest thing to be able to pick up, and to be on the same page with your receivers and to be in rhythm and on time with those guys, I think, is the hardest thing. But Baker did have the benefit of being in a lot of different offenses. That was one of the challenges, I think, for him in Cleveland, and maybe why we didn't see his full potential or why things didn't work out, is because just about every year he was getting a new offensive coordinator with new terminology, new concepts that they were going to feature. And so that is one of the things that I was able to reflect on later in my career. We'd bring in a new coach, bring in a new offensive coordinator. They'd show me the playbook and be like, oh yeah, I had this one 5 years ago, so you can just keep that. I don't really need it. I already know everything that's in here. versus a guy that maybe is in one system his whole career. It's a little bit more difficult for him to show up and plug and play. But I'm really interested to see how the rest of the season goes for Baker, because obviously he had such a great debut, but he struggled a lot at the beginning of the season in Carolina. And everyone's wondering, like, hey, why was that? Was that because the offensive coordinator and the system maybe didn't fit him? Or was that because maybe there was some other issues that will kind of bubble up a little bit as Baker kind of gets more games under his belt in LA with the Rams?
Don't call it a comeback.
So with Baker comeback on Thursday Night Football, like, why do you feel like that's so dramatic on his overall NFL story? You know, because like he's been counted out so many times with him being the number one overall pick. You don't normally have number one overall picks being counted out like Baker. So like, why do you feel like that story is so dramatic for his overall NFL story?
Well, I think it's just everything that goes into the Baker Mayfield story, from being a walk-on to being not tall enough by a lot of people's standards to winning the Heisman Trophy, but also the bravado that he carries himself with a lot of times, the roller coaster of emotions that he is on and off the field at times. He's got an enormously passionate fan base, but then he's got an equally enormous passionate group of people that cheer against him, right? Because he's just that polarizing figure, because he has that personality, that persona that he allows to come out that we just don't normally see with quarterbacks in the NFL. They're usually much more reserved. They're not willing to put themselves out there. They're not willing to shave a mustache in a post-game press conference and show up with a jacket looking like they've been sitting outside in the rain for the last 5 days. But I think that's why he's endeared himself to a lot of fans, especially if you're fans of Oklahoma, or if you're fans, a lot of fans in Cleveland still, and a lot of his teammates, right? Because he feels like he's a real person and you're getting the real and raw emotions without a filter every single time you see him.
You know, our mutual pal, Daniel Jeremiah, on draft day said, Sam Darnold might be the more talented guy. I mean, nobody saw Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen coming on the level that they have arrived at. But he said, you know, Bake's personality is maybe ideal for that town. Obviously, for all of your great individual deeds, you didn't, you'd never played in the Super Bowl or anything as a Cleveland Brown. Is that about right? Was that a good fit? In retrospect, obviously, the way it ended indicates otherwise.
That's right. I didn't play in any Super Bowls either. But I think Daniel Jeremiah was onto something, because Cleveland, it's a blue collar town, loyal, passionate fans, very real, very raw. And that's exactly who Baker is. And so I think as a professional athlete, you endear yourself to your fan base by them being able to identify with you, being the underdog story. You know, in Cleveland, they've had a lot of lack of success here in the last 20 years since they've come back. And I think there's definitely an underdog mentality, not only within the fan base, but within the city of Cleveland, with the tough times that the city has gone through in the last, century almost. And the folks in Cleveland really identified a lot with Baker, and they would have loved the story of Baker Mayfield taking this team, this once proud franchise, and bringing it back to glory for sure.
Hey, so, a lot of people, especially in Pittsburgh and a lot of people across the nation, we seen Baker in a lot of commercials, like a lot of commercials when he was playing. With him playing like this, and if he continues to play like this, do you think it's a possibility that he can make a case for being the Rams' future quarterback, or possibly coming back into TV commercials and things like that?
I think there's a chance that he's in more TV commercials before he's the Rams quarterback, because Matthew Stafford's their guy. But you don't really know what the injury situation with Matthew is. And I think that's got to be really concerning if you're a Rams fan, because here's this guy that you spent a lot of resources to bring there. He wins you a Super Bowl. And then, all of a sudden, it seems like the whole year, even from in training camp, we didn't really know if he's going to be healthy, and then he gets banged up and misses a good portion of the season. And so you don't know what the future holds, because he's got a lot of mileage on his arm going back to his days in Detroit when he was throwing for 500,000-600,000 yards every season, because their team stunk. They were behind, and he was just throwing the ball 40 to 50 times in almost every single game, because he's all the Lions had. So I don't know what the future holds for Matthew Stafford and the Rams. Certainly, I'm guaranteeing that Baker hopes that he can, finish this season really strong, maybe make a case for at least being the backup next season when Matthew Stafford is healthy. And then who knows what happens into the future with Matthew Stafford. But I think no matter what happens, as long as Baker's in the NFL, he's going to be a story because of the polarizing nature of him, his brand, and because he still has a ton of fans in Cleveland. He's got certainly probably still a ton of people that really love him in Carolina. And he's already got a lot of fans in LA with the Rams. And I think it's because as fans, and now I'm a fan, I'm not a player anymore, we identify with people on the field doing things that we feel like maybe we could do, right? When I watched LeBron play basketball, I don't identify with him because I could never do half of the athletic things that he could do. But when somebody sees a Baker Mayfield who's maybe not tall enough, maybe doesn't have a big enough arm, maybe not fast enough, they think like, hey, if all the things would have happened right for me, I could be Baker Mayfield, right? And so they're able to sort of live out their dreams by watching a player that they really adore. And especially when he plays with so much passion and emotion. I grew up in Wisconsin when Brett Favre was winning the Super Bowl and going to 2 Super Bowls. And we love Brett because he played with those emotions and he played with his heart on his sleeve. And that's exactly who Baker Mayfield is as well.
Boy, you really hit on something. I'm sure you remember when the Steelers were in Cleveland last year in the fourth quarter and Baker is leading them down the field for the go-ahead score, and he got knocked out of bounds, and he jumps up, and is he hurt again, and he runs back onto the field, and he makes the big demonstrative first down marker, and the stadium goes wild, and then he gets intercepted. I feel like that was kind of the defining play or stretch of the Baker Mayfield experience in Cleveland. But let's dig in on what you said a little bit, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. So Baker Mayfield maybe potentially sets up as a Laverne and Shirley type figure coming through clean on the other side with a Hollywood ending here, but there's also a Shakespearean quality to it in pigskin terms, a tale of two cities. So maybe Dickensian instead of Shakespearean, but either way, so you have Bake now in LA and in Cleveland, the new quarterback, and I agree with you, probably there are a lot of Browns fans. Do you think, best you can tell, Joe Thomas, does Jimmy Haslam, does Andrew Berry, if they have a time machine, do they undo the last year and stick with Bake and undo? Because I suspect they didn't know that there was going to be the avalanche of negativity associated with bringing Deshaun Watson in.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of things that they didn't anticipate that have happened within the last year. Baker did not play very well when he had that injured shoulder in the 2021 season. And I think it became apparent to the people on the football side of things that if you want to win a Super Bowl in the NFL and if you want to be consistently great, you need to have one of these franchise quarterbacks that, let's say he's top 5 or top 10, right? You need a Mahomes, a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson. You need one of those guys. And I think they realized that Baker, at least they thought, Baker was good enough to make you good. And occasionally you get in the playoffs and you'd compete for a division, but wasn't good enough to go on a run against, especially in the AFC, all the great young quarterbacks that are in that conference. And so they made the decision that, hey, we're in this to win Super Bowls, not just to put fans in the seats and be good enough to keep our jobs. And so I give them a lot of credit for maybe going out on a limb and trying to make that decision and going for a home run and saying, hey, we want to win our first Super Bowl. We don't just want to be good for the next 10 years. And I think early on in Baker's time in Carolina, the Browns had to be feeling pretty good about that decision because he just didn't play very well. Now, obviously, he has a chance with Sean McVay, which I think is an offense that actually fits Baker. I thought Carolina was like the worst possible place for Baker to go to, which you felt bad for him when you were watching him. I mean, for them to throw as much quick game as they did and try to throw him from in the pocket was like a travesty against that poor man's football ability because that's just not what he does well at all. I mean, he's a short quarterback. We've seen with Russell Wilson. Like when you're a short quarterback, it's hard to throw the quick game because guys are going to get their hands up and knock your ball down. Your arm angle and where the ball gets released from is not high enough. And you can't really see the middle of the field. And so you have to either have tremendous like Drew Brees did, anticipation and confidence in your receivers going across the middle and just throwing to a blind spot, or you don't throw the ball there, or you got to get the guy out of the pocket. And that's what Baker does best. That's what he didn't do at all in Carolina. And so he failed in a very bad way. But I think in Sean McVay's offense, even though he does run a lot more 11 receiver or 11 personnel quarterback throwing from in the pocket when Matthew Stafford was there, than a true Kyle Shanahan system. I think the Kyle Shanahan system, where you are seeing a lot more bootlegs, a lot more rollouts, a lot more half-field reads, that fits Baker's skill set a lot better. And so I think if he's going to succeed anywhere going through the rest of his career right now, it's going to be in LA in the system that he's in. And so it will be interesting to see, everyone's going to compare Deshaun Watson and how he performs to Baker Mayfield and how he performs moving forward. But to your other point, I think that the Browns anticipated maybe a 4 to 6 game suspension and maybe not as much blowback as they got when they signed Deshaun. And then when they got 11 games and a lot of blowback, obviously, especially on social media, it was definitely a lot more difficult for them to handle than they expected. But I will say that the coaching staff and the players handled it as well as they possibly could have, especially when you consider they weren't the ones that were making the decision. They were just the ones that had to deal with it because this is what was put in front of them. And as a player, Ryan, you don't get to make a lot of decisions, but you get to decide how you handle it and how you treat things moving forward.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that one. That's the biggest thing with the NFL. It's a lot of decisions that are made that the players have no control over. Like Joe might have had a little bit more control. He was a captain and a big time guy.
Don't fool yourself. No, still the hard hat guy.
Yeah, but like you were saying, we don't really have much control over what happens in the locker room. And once somebody leaves your team, you have to deal with it. And once somebody comes to your team, you have to just welcome them with open arms because all you guys at the end of the day are still trying to win a championship. So I think at the end of the day, the Browns might have not knew that they were going to get all this backlash from Deshaun, but I think everybody in the locker room is saying, hey, this is our guy now, and we're going to try to win a championship with him because they feel like he has the talent level to help them get there. So I think it's going to be exciting to see how, not this year, but next year ends up turning out for the Cleveland Browns.
It's interesting because you guys mirror what I say. I can say, I don't know if it's ever come up. I did not play in the NFL.
Oh, what?
Not with distinction.
Now that is the most shocking thing I've heard this year.
Yeah, I was. Well, either way, I consider myself at this point a voice for the fans in general. And what you just said, Joe and Shazier, is what I would say to fans. This isn't your responsibility to moralize or try to make sense of. You're not going to abandon your team, although there was some percentage of fans when this trade went through. There were people in the offseason who said, I'm done with this team forever now. I feel like maybe some people are coming back. What would be your counsel, Joe, and for that matter, 5-0, to those fans to try and reconcile? Like, I don't love this guy. I don't love what I've heard about this guy off the field, but he is my quarterback. How do you come back to a team that maybe you don't agree with a specific moral decision that they made or personnel decision, if those two things conflate with each other?
Yeah, it's what I think all Cleveland Browns fans have sort of wrestled with for the last 9 months since Deshaun Watson was signed. It's like, hey, this is my team. It's been my team. For me, since I played there since 2007 when I got drafted and raising my kids as Browns fans, we love the team. And then they make a decision to sign a player with as many accusations at the time as they did, and with a potential suspension looming, and the moral and ethical question about signing a player that has those things looming over his head.
Last thing for me about the Browns is, do you think Kevin Stefanski definitely comes back? What needs to happen over this last few games to ensure that is safe and secure for that guy? Because there was a lot tethered to Stefanski as much as it was to Baker Mayfield a couple of years ago with the rise of these Browns.
I think it's all going to be about the performance of Deshaun Watson and the progress that he makes in these last weeks of the season. The Browns have not lived up to expectations thus far. They have not had the season we thought. If they had won just a couple more games, right now they'd still be in the thick of the playoff race. And they had several games won, especially at the beginning of the season, if not for monumental collapses. Like in the Jets game, I was there. Somehow they lost the game that it was literally over if Nick Chubb just falls down. They were up 14 or 15 points with like 2 minutes left in the game, and they go ahead and score, and then all of a sudden this cascade of improbable events happen. But if any one of those things didn't happen, they win that game, and maybe the season is different. So Kevin's definitely been under the gun a little bit this season. And I think from an ownership standpoint, the people that are making the decisions about his future, they're giving him a little bit of a mulligan, especially because when Deshaun came in here, it was very difficult. I thought Kevin handled it really well. They expected 4 to 6 games on the high end for a suspension. Turns out to be 11. And so he gets a little bit of a mulligan. However, at this point, you would need to see progress with Deshaun Watson at quarterback. So it's going to foretell you about how good they can be next year with Kevin Stefanski running the offense. Now, defensively, that's almost been the real story of this season, because we thought the defense was going to be able to hold this team together and keep them competitive until Deshaun came back, and then they were going to be in the thick of the playoff race. But even with all the first-round picks and all the supposed talent on the defensive side of the ball, they've one of the worst defenses in the NFL this season. And so there might be some changes on that side of the football. I think most fans have been calling for it most of the season to fire the defensive coordinator and do some things differently on the defensive side of the staff. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was one of the changes that Kevin Stefanski makes after the season, because certainly when you have a season of disappointment, you're going to have to make some type of changes to prove not only to the fans, but to the ownership who's in control of your job, if you can be the person that can lead them to the playoffs and to the Super Bowl, which is why you brought Deshaun Watson here in the first place.
Yeah, so honestly, as a Steelers fan, I'm completely fine with everything you guys are doing over there right now. No, but I definitely
say ditto, Joe. Just say ditto, man. We're 5-8 too.
That's right.
No, but yeah, I definitely the one thing about me, I definitely like to see good football. So I definitely want to see things turn around. I definitely want to see the defense playing a little bit better, and just Kevin Stefanski trying to figure things out with Deshaun, because if you can get Deshaun on the run and have them able to move around, that's going to allow that team to have a lot more success. So I want to see if Kevin Stefanski can kind of figure that out, and I think, like you said, he'll get a mulligan. They'll give him a chance to try to figure that out, and if he can't, then I think, this year might be he might have one more year after this year, but after that, I think this might be his last one. But, Joe, I would love to ask you more questions about Wisconsin, but I know we got to let you go. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us on Don't Call It a Comeback.
Hey, anytime, guys. Thanks for having me on. It was great seeing you guys. It's been a little while, but anytime you want me back, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Don't call it a comeback.
All right, Shazier, it's time for other comeback stories in the news we need to give a look to. This is the Check Down. Ooh, your backyard, my homeland, Pittsburgh, PA. Penguins legend Chris Letang pulled off a remarkable comeback of his own last week. After suffering a stroke, it took the defender only 10 days to come back to practice. That's the second one in his young life. Shazier, I know we think of football players as gladiators, but are hockey players, in fact, the toughest athletes?
Man, that's a tough question, because hockey is a very physical sport. You got guys skating at 20-plus miles an hour, crashing into each other, and it's a very skillful sport. So, me personally, I don't know if they're the toughest guys out there when it comes to playing a sport, but I would say that they're very underrated when it comes to one of the most skillful sports. That's a very skillful sport. Chris Letang is a phenomenal guy, phenomenal player, and just to come back 10 days later from a stroke is incredible. So I can't say that hockey are the toughest guys. If I had to use a sport, I would definitely have to go with MMA fighters or rugby. I would feel like those are pretty tough sports. And then football would probably be my third. But hockey's right up there. But I think when it comes to toughness and skill, I think that hockey might be the number one. Is toughness and skill together. But when it comes to just strictly toughness, I'm gonna have to convert to another sport.
Well, you already just said it, 5-0. Let's see those MMA guys do it while they're wearing skates on ice. The Heisman Trophy came back to South Central as Trojans QB Caleb Williams beat out Max Duggan, C.J. Stroud, and Stetson Bennett. The QB joked that while he got the award, the other nominees get to go to the playoffs. 5-0, would you rather make the college football playoffs or win a Heisman Trophy?
This is a tough one. So me personally, I'm a winner. I prefer to win championships because winning championships provide all that other stuff for you. But winning a Heisman Trophy is awesome. Like, think about it. Bryce Young, he won the Heisman Trophy last year and didn't win the championship. And that's one of the things that they're going to hold against him, that he never won a championship as the quarterback. So Nick Saban, everybody that he's coached has won a national championship while he was at Alabama. And Bryce Young, he's won one when he was a freshman, but he never won it as a quarterback. So winning a Heisman is great. Obviously, you have all the accolades that go with it. But me personally, I think it's much better if you actually win the championship, because that's a team dynamic. And I know Caleb Williams is going to be upset if C.J. Stroud wins the national championship and he wins the Heisman. You win the Heisman, but he still has one up on you.
If I were the third string left guard, I think I would rather win the Heisman Trophy. But if you're the quarterback, I think you're right. You're better off to be the QB winning the national championship than you are the Heisman Trophy as far as pro prospects go and endorsement deals and all of that. So I think you're on the right track there. Real quick, though, 5-0, strike the Heisman pose.
There we go.
Mine's better. Mine's better.
I don't know. The thing is, with the Heisman pose, it's a stiff arm. I don't know if your stiff arm is strong enough to keep somebody off. So I think mine was better.
Well, next time we're face to face together, I'll let you find out.
I was one of the best linebackers in the league for a reason. I can break down stiff arms.
Yeah, well, you haven't seen this kind of wiggle. Look at this. See it? It's in front of you. Now it's gone.
It looked like you're doing the waddle. The Jaden Waddle dance. That's what it looked like you're doing.
I'll give you a little dead leg action. Boom, like that. Hey, the Heisman Trophy came back to South Central as Trojans QB Caleb Williams beat out Max Duggan, C.J. Stroud, and Stetson Bennett. The award is USC's 8th, breaking a 4-way tie with Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Oklahoma. That is, if you include Reggie Bush's vacant trophy. With college football and NIL where it is now, is it time for the NCAA to give Reggie his Heisman back?
I definitely feel Reggie Bush deserves his Heisman back. Obviously, what he did at that time was wrong. But now, for the same thing that he did, and his wasn't all that bad, but the same thing he did, guys are getting paid for now. So, to me, I think that he should definitely get his trophy back. But the one thing that kind of frustrates me with this whole Heisman situation recently, the whole season, everybody said C.J. Stroud was the favorite to win the Heisman. The whole season. He has one bad game, and now he's third in the Heisman. Like, in my opinion, Caleb Williams deserved to win the Heisman. But to me, I just don't understand how he became third place when he was the clear favorite the whole season. But I definitely feel Reggie Bush deserves the Heisman, and it's multiple reasons I feel like he deserves it. He deserves it because of the NIL, and guys are getting paid now, which is incredible for guys. And I know some people say it's messing up the game, but I don't think it's messing up the game at all. Georgia's still the best team in the league, one of the best teams in the league. Ohio State was still one of the best teams in the league. We still have TCU, and we have
who else?
And we have Michigan.
That's the one.
Michigan.
That's who's in there.
And Michigan.
That's why C.J. Stroud doesn't get the Heisman, because he lost by 22 to Michigan. That's why.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Caleb Williams lost by 22 in his last game as well. But all I have to say is, I feel like we still have great college football with the NIL. And then the next reason I feel that Reggie Bush deserves it is because Reggie Bush, I don't care what anybody says, is a top 5 college football player of all time. He is a top 5 football player of all time. When you go back and watch him, obviously Archie Griffin probably has to go number 1, Tim Tebow 2, Cam Newton 3. If you're just going to just throw all the quarterbacks in there. But if you don't throw the quarterbacks in there, he's probably top 2 if you don't throw quarterbacks in there. He's so phenomenal. And so many guys in this generation and the generations before watched Reggie Bush and just seen how he made people like USC that lived on the East Coast. So I just really feel he deserves his trophy back, and because he's a guy that a lot of people wanted to play football because of.
I mean, I respect your thoughts. I appreciate your loyalty to C.J. Stroud and Archie Griffin, but as an old who hails from the banks of the Three Rivers, let me tell you, Tony Dorsett whips up on Archie Griffin any day of the week in terms of who was the better college running back, Shazier. But you're entitled to your opinion.
We're talking about Heisman's.
I get it.
We're talking about Heisman's, right?
The big question.
You got 2 of them.
All right. I know what happened. I am curious, though, where physically is Reggie Bush's Heisman Trophy? Is it in a closet like in Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end? Is it in some crate in a giant warehouse? Is it easily accessible? Has it been melted down and turned into a bauble around the neck of some high-profile NCAA official? I don't know, but I want to get to the bottom of that. The 6-7 Detroit Lions have come back from the brink to stay alive in the playoff hunt. Listen, I'll admit it. When I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong, and I was wrong about these Lions. They've won 5 of their last 6, including a 34-23 win over the division-leading Vikes. Shazier, is this Lions midseason comeback for real?
So I was watching Peter Strager this morning, and he was just saying right now, Jared Goff is probably the second best quarterback in the NFC in the last 6 weeks. So if Jared Goff continues to play like that, they have Jameson Williams, they have DJ Chark, they have 2 amazing running backs. To me personally, I think that they are somebody that a lot of teams don't want to play right now. I've seen something that said, who would you rather play, the Cowboys or the Lions right now? And the Lions have a lot of momentum.
James Cameron's, the Lions wear Honolulu blue. I don't know what the blue is that those Avatar people wear. But either way, James Cameron's franchise is making its comeback. The Odd 9 Classic is the largest grossing movie of all time. And the sequel looks to get moviegoers to come back to theaters. For all the money the original pulled in, I somehow never saw it. What's a cultural phenomenon you never got into, Shazier?
I would have to say, so this is something that more of the Black community watch. I know that a lot of people watch like Power and Raising Kanan, and I'm gonna be honest, I never really got into it. So I watched Power for like the first season. It was pretty good, and then I just never kind of followed up. So I would just say probably watching Power and Raising Kanan. I know in the African American community, the minority community, a lot of people like those shows, and I never really got into them.
Hey, that's it for this episode of Don't Call It a Comeback. By the way, some people may have noticed a giant billboard in Times Square promoting this show a couple weeks back. We may make another comeback there and appear there this month, so go ahead and snap a pic of it and tweet it at me or Shazier. We'll be sure to shout you out on the show if that happens.
So make sure to also follow, rate, and review us on wherever you're listening to us. And then go to YouTube, go to the Wondery channel, and check us out and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes. And we'll see you all next week.
Don't call it a comeback. I've been waiting on this moment my whole life. Can't call it a comeback. Everybody to your feet, make arenas rise. Yeah, I'm saying from the left to right, we get it on tonight. We do it all, but we don't back down. Just give me one shot, one chance, I'ma take it. Fixing up the game, but these records I keep on breaking.